Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, breaking down some Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge press conference quotes and takeaways. It was an interesting one, guys, as it always is with Gettleman and Judge. Judge always has the feeling that he knows what's going on. He has this team going in the right direction, making some really important moves. Then Gettleman comes on, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm listening to. And that's not a knock on Gettleman. It's just the way maybe he speaks and the way he relays information is just not as good as Judge. Which is why I feel, when we do listen to Judge, I feel very confident and motivated with the way this team is going and the progress that they're making. So I'm excited to talk about that, a couple takeaways and big things that we heard from both of them. Before we dive into that, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. Obviously we're about a week away from free agency. Things are really starting to heat up. Today was the franchise tag deadline. The Giants placed a tag on Leonard Williams. That's big news for us. We also had our general manager and head coach speak to the media as they were required to by the NFL. So that's also big news for us. Things are really starting to heat up, which is exciting. It's a little daunting as well. It can be a little scary as we enter this free agency period, as we go in. Hopefully not with too high of expectations because, there's a lot of players we want to see signed or re-signed, and maybe it's not completely realistic that we get all the guys we want, right? So, but let's talk about these press conferences. A lot of interesting things were said, but also a lot of nothing because they really don't want to reveal anything heading into free agency. Obviously, they don't want other teams knowing what the Giants' plans are, so they didn't say too much, but the things that they did say that we can discuss, we will discuss, and there is some interesting stuff to discuss, so I'm excited to get into that.
Absolutely. No, they did franchise tag Leonard Williams today. That is official. And, wide receivers like Kenny Golladay, they didn't get franchise tagged. Hassan Reddick, pass rusher from the Cardinals, didn't get franchise tagged. Some really big names that the Giants were like, okay, maybe we'll actually take a shot at them. We'll make a bid and just place a bid, see what we can do. If we could open up some solid cap space, of course. But, a bunch of guys didn't get franchise tag. Leonard Williams did. I think that's just a placeholder. They're probably going to iron out a long-term deal prior to March 17th when free agency starts, so they need to be under the cap by that time. With that being said, they have an extra week to figure out what they're going to do long-term with Leonard Williams. They cannot go into the 2021 season with a $19.3 million cap hit. Right now, they only have about $8 million available, so they're already, significantly over that with that cap space. It's not looking so good in terms of being able to spend this offseason, so they're going to have to push it down the line a little bit. They're going to have to maybe restructure some of these deals. And one of the major takeaways from this press conference came from Dave Gettleman. And he essentially said, I hate restructuring contracts. You always want to have a flat contract, meaning every year you want to have the same cap hit. If you're signing a $15 million deal per year, or let's say 45 over 3 years, you want it to be $15 million cap hit every season. That way you know what you're working with. It's very straightforward. It's easy to work around that. But as we know in the NFL, especially when COVID occurs and you have to lower the cap, the projections are all off. You need to be more creative sometimes. So I think the Giants are going to have to get a little bit more just creative with the way that they manipulate the cap. We're looking at the Saints right now. They just use their franchise tag on their safety. I don't know how they're getting this money. I don't know where it's coming from. But these guys are freaking geniuses at maneuvering around cap space and figuring out how to get underneath of it and still retaining some of their key players. The Giants need to do the same thing. Everyone thought the cap was going to catch up to the Saints 2015, 16, 17, 18, now it's 2021, and they're still getting it done. And, that's kind of a test to the idea that the cap is fluid. But with that being said, this is a very unique situation. A lot of great players are going to be cut this offseason. We're going to see it's going to be a slaughterhouse the next week and a half, especially when free agency starts. It's going to be kind of crazy. I'm excited, but also, it sucks for these players who should be on teams. They're going to have to settle for 1 year deals and just take a flyer, for 1 year. So it's unfortunate, but it could play out for the Giants in their favor. They can get guys that are valuable on cheaper contracts to fill positions like Kevin Zeitler if they cut him. Who knows, We just recorded a video with Brian Walker from D-Backs Academy, trainer for Jabril Peppers, to debunk the idea that Giants should cut Jabril Peppers, who would save them $6.7 million, but he's so multiple, such a great player. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that would be a terrible mistake. He's a leader on this defense. He's a guy who can play multiple positions, and he's just an energetic force for the players around him. He helps them play better. So, Anthony, what do you think about the idea of restructuring some of these contracts? Do you think that Gettleman's being a little bit conservative, or do you think they should try and open up space that way?
Well, I'll say this. Okay, so you mentioned Jabril Peppers. We just did a video on him. You guys can go watch that instead whenever that's live, and you can hear my thoughts on that. I think that's a terrible idea in summary. I don't think that the Giants should cut him, but I will say he's on his fifth-year option. That's why this is a topic of conversation, right? Because that fifth-year option, you can cut it and you have zero dead cap, right? So that's why that's interesting. But we have another player who's also on a fifth-year option that we can consider doing something similar with, right? Evan Engram. But with Evan Engram, Joe Judge today, here's another key takeaway that we got from the press conference. Joe Judge does not want to move on from Evan Engram. He fully believes in Evan Engram. I believe he said he was confident in Evan Engram, and he really looks forward to continuing to coach him and have him be a part of this team going forward in the future as a huge bright spot on our offense. So that's one takeaway that I got from Joe Judge's press conference that I thought was interesting. And then, yes, with the restructuring of contracts, Dave Gettleman did discuss that briefly, and I thought that was interesting because I get what he's saying. He hates restructuring contracts, but it's not like he hasn't done it, right? He did it with Nate Solder, and it's kind of the reason that we're in such a terrible spot with Nate Solder's contract right now, isn't it? Like, his contract was already bad, and then it was restructured, and then the COVID opt-out happened, so now we're just stuck with this contract that should have been expiring by now, but isn't. And it would have been if it wasn't restructured. So sometimes kicking that money down the line isn't always the best thing, because you could see how it can get bogged down into one offseason like it is for us right now. You never know what's going to happen. Yes, salary cap is very fluid, and while it's projected to continue to go up each year after this year, where it's regressed because of COVID, do you really know that for a fact? Do you know that with certainty that the NFL salary cap will continue to rise? What if something else happens and it retracts again? You never know. So you do have to be smart with your contracts. You can't just go restructuring everybody, kicking all this money down the line, because sometimes it can come back to haunt you. And that seems to be what's happening with the Giants right now. Nate Solder was signed 3 years ago, I believe it was. So he only made it through 2 years of his contract, I believe, right? And then the opt-out. So or maybe he only made it through one. I don't even remember at this point. It feels like it's been so long with Nate Solder. Yeah, he played 1 year on the contract, and then he opted out of the second year. So technically, this is the second year on his contract. Should have been the third. Should have been the year where we could cut him and actually save a lot of money. But now it's not.
He played 2 years. So it's the third.
There you go.
I don't even remember him. That's how relevant it's become.
It's such a blur. He's been so... I don't know, man. You know what? It is what it is. The Nate Solder contract is just one example to me of why restructuring contracts isn't always the best idea, even though it sounds like a really good idea at the time. Let's say James Bradbury, for example, right? Because we could restructure him, maybe extend him and get his money down the line and save some cap space this year. Okay, now what if he gets injured and doesn't come back and isn't the same player, so we're just paying him a lot when he's not as good rather than paying a lot when he is good, right? Something like that could happen. You have to plan for that. That's why I understand personally. I agree with Dave Gettleman. I understand where he's coming from. Probably not the best idea to go out here and restructure a bunch of contracts.
Exactly, and for the most part, when it comes to Nate Solder, yes, the contract's a problem. I also don't trust him playing right tackle. Everyone's like, yo, restructure and move into right tackle. The guy hasn't played right tackle in over a decade.
I'm good on that. I'm
good on that. If anything, give Matt Peart the starting job. Just give it to him. I don't even want to see Nate Solder on the field. Cut him post June 1st. Use that money for draft picks.
I really hope to see Matt Peart starting at right tackle. And here's another key takeaway from these press conferences. Dave Gettleman did discuss Matt Peart and the potential of playing right tackle. He said that he is confident that Matt Peart can go out there and start at right tackle. Me too. I think anybody who's been listening to Fireside Giants for a long time knows I've been a big Matt Peart guy since before he was even on the Giants. He was a player that I fell in love with in the pre-draft process. Believe it or not, I sit down and watch hours of film a day leading up to the draft, and he was a player that really caught my eye, and I really liked him as a prospect. I put out a mock draft the morning of the draft last year. Third round, number 99 overall. I had Matt Peart in my mock draft. It came to reality when the Giants did it the following day, and that was really exciting. And so the reason that I had him so high on my list is because I really do see him being a quality starter. Not a quality depth piece. It's third round. I want him to pan out and be a starter. And I think that he can be. I think, he showed a lot in his rookie season. He struggled at times, as all rookies do, but he played really well when he was out there. And I would much rather go out there in year 2 of his career, have him start and fail that way or succeed that way, than go out and do this over again with another stopgap right tackle that we're going to overpay for a year. It's much cheaper just to have a third-round rookie go start at right tackle, because you know that you're going to get comparable level of play from that third-round rookie that you would from whatever stopgap right tackle you decide to waste money on in free agency. So let's just go ahead, stop with these veteran signings at right tackle that we've been doing every single year. Let's just let our young guy grow, develop, and see what we have in him. And I think that we have a lot in Matt Peart, so I really want to see him start the 2021 season.
Yeah, that's a huge takeaway. That's probably the biggest one in my opinion, from this press conference from Dave Gettleman specifically, saying he'd feel confident rolling into the season with Andrew Thomas and Matt Peart are the starting tackles. Of course, Peart's a little bit more of a toss-up. You know, he did look good in some facets of his game. Really good run blocker. Really struggled in some occurrences, some scenarios with pass blocking. I remember specifically against the Ravens, he got really beat up on one drive, like 3 consecutive sacks. So that was not good at all, but for the most part, I think that he's a player that has the tangible traits. He's a smart player. He works hard. I think he can easily become our starting right tackle. And, you know, Gettleman said at some point the kids are going to have to play. And yes, I do agree with that. But at the same time, you know, Daniel Jones, what happens if Matt Peart struggles? What happens if the right side of the line is a complete disaster? They cut Zeitler. They start Matt Peart. They sign a stopgap veteran to fill in for Zeitler. They draft a rookie. And Daniel Jones now is going into his 3rd year, and he's being pummeled every single snap. You know, what happens then? Yes, play your rookies, but don't kill your quarterback in the process. We're still dealing with offensive line problems 3 years into Dave Gettleman's tenure again. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole nother subject. But again, like, it is a problem that we do have to face and talk about, unfortunately. But for the most part, that was a major takeaway, I thought, from the press conference. You know, Matt Peart being a potential starter, Gettleman saying he'd feel comfortable with it, so that's big. Another one was that the Giants love Evan Engram. They think he's a hard worker. He's disciplined. He does the right things in practice. He's exactly what you want in a player. He's a high-spirited guy. And Joe Judge had nothing but great things to say about him. Specifically, he was basically just like, he's not going anywhere. Like, he's one of our premier guys. We want to get him more involved on offense moving forward. So that's something to consider. He's not going to be traded, guys. Like, I really don't think they're going to let Evan Engram go, and that shouldn't deter the Giants from signing or drafting Kyle Pitts if he was to fall to 11. I think having both of those guys would be awesome. In fact, I think it would be the epitome of a modern-day offense, because Kyle Pitts, like, I saw actually someone say Kyle Pitts would be a top 5 wide receiver if he entered the draft as just an X receiver on the outside, like just a receiver. That's what they're saying. He would be a top 5 receiver, and I agree with them. He's like Plaxico on the outside, and he's also capable of playing Z, slot, and inline. The guy's incredible. So, you know, Evan Engram not going anywhere, pretty crazy. That they're not even consider trading him after all the drops and mishaps, but he's a great guy to have in the locker room. And I'm not going to sit here and act like he's not a great person. He is a great dude. He works really, really hard. He just makes mental boneheaded mistakes, and I think a lot of it's mental. I think a lot of it is mental. None of it is athletically oriented or connected. It's all mental. It's all in his head. So that's something that, you know, he has to iron out. He has to get rid of those problems. But I do think getting Saquon back, I do think getting a couple more playmakers will take the pressure off of him, and I think it will actually help him. What do you think about that?
I do agree. I think that, you know, Evan Engram is a guy who gets a lot of flack. He did make a lot of mistakes this year. He really had a lot of trouble with concentration drops and, you know, stuff like that. But he is athletically gifted. That's a fact. You know, he's one of the most athletically gifted tight ends in the NFL. He has high potential. We've seen him play at a high level before. His rookie season, he kind of dominated for a large stretch of games there. And even last season, not the one that just happened, but the season before that, 2019, we saw him have a lot of really good games before he got injured. This season, he struggled a lot, but did have a couple good games. You can look at the Cincinnati Bengals game, arguably the best game of his career receiving-wise, right? So, you know, he's still a good player. But one thing that I'll say, the Giants, yes, while we're adamant today that he is part of their future plans, we have heard a similar story from the Giants before. We have not heard that from Joe Judge before because he hasn't been around that long. But let's not pretend that we didn't hear Dave Gettleman say in the past we did not sign Odell Beckham Jr. just to trade him, right? So oftentimes the Giants like to say things that they don't really mean so that they don't reveal their true plans and true identity, so they can kind of move in the shadows and make a trade without people really knowing what's coming. So
yet every year we know the draft pick a week before.
Well, in some instances, like 2018, we knew it 2 months before. So you make a good point. Maybe they're not as secretive and they don't move in the shadows as well as we would like them to. But with certain things, they do try to keep under guard and keep under wraps, right? So this could be one of those scenarios. I personally don't think it is. I think they really do believe in Evan Engram. I think he's going to be here for a long time. But if a team calls, makes a really nice offer, I don't think they're just going to say no because we promised the fans that we wouldn't trade him. I think, there's always that chance there. We've seen that in the past with Dave Gettleman. So it wouldn't completely shock me. And even going back to his Carolina days, he put the franchise tag on Josh Norman, promised he was going to make him a focal point of defense, rescinded the franchise tag. The fans had an uproar. He was actually right to do that because Josh Norman really fell off after that. But the fans hated it, ultimately drove him out of Carolina. But this is a thing. This is a pattern with Dave Gettleman. Sometimes he promises the players are going to be here for a long time, and he doesn't follow through on that promise. So, yeah, I'll take it away. Joe Judge loves Evan Engram, but who knows how much say Joe Judge has compared to Dave Gettleman, and maybe Dave Gettleman doesn't love him as much. Just keep that in mind is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, totally fair. Another takeaway was basically, it's kind of funny. Someone asked him what he thinks if the Giants need to maximize their roster upside with Daniel Jones on his rookie contract. So basically they're like asking him if they need to win now in Jones's rookie window, right? They need to spend now, make this team as good as it can be through free agency while Jones is on his rookie deal so they don't have to pay him later on and doesn't really wreck their cap situation. Dave Gettleman responded by saying, "You're giving me the window theory. Microsoft Windows is nice, but I'm not a window theory guy." So what does that tell me? It tells me he really doesn't care about the cap space, because the Giants have had terrible situations with money the past couple seasons. And it seems like he's just making moves and letting Kevin Abrams figure out the money portion of it, which, what you're supposed to do if you're Kevin Abrams. But if Dave Gettleman's just handing out contracts and asking him to figure out how to fit it in, I don't know if that's the best thing, because normally teams build through the rookie contracts. That is a very known fact. Like I'm not even going to say Deshaun Watson because Houston completely destroyed that one. But we know that. Look what happened to them. They tried to get out of it. They ended up trading away half of their best players, and then, they screwed over Deshaun Watson. But I don't know. What do you think about the rookie window? I guess I can see Dave Gettleman's point of view. You do look at guys like Drew Brees. You do look at guys like Tom Brady. They're not in the rookie window, but they're still winning. They're still winning with being paid. So I guess it doesn't really make much sense to say the rookie window is a necessity.
What I'll say is I actually really liked that question. Dave Gettleman, sure, the Windows line was funny. I didn't really like his response to it because I think that, again, what is he really going to say? He's not going to tell us his true plans, right? So, whatever. But I think that the rookie window is an important thing that the Giants should be trying to do, trying to win while your quarterback is on a rookie contract. Let's look at a guy like Dak Prescott. He just got a contract yesterday, right? 4 years, $160 million. $40 million on average annually for Dak Prescott. He's not a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but he's being paid like one. That's going to be a common theme here. And honestly, I was talking about this with a friend yesterday. There's almost a bubble that's being created with quarterbacks in the NFL, right? It's kind of like a market. The supply and demand is going to push these quarterbacks' contracts really, really high, even if they're not as proven. Now, Dak Prescott is a proven quarterback, arguably top 10 quarterback in the year, in every year that he plays when he's healthy, right? But he is coming off of a terrible injury, right? And he just played on the franchise tag, so it was surprising to see him get that contract in the middle of this injury, coming off of the franchise tag. They really could have just moved on if they wanted to, but they didn't do that because it's so hard to find good quarterbacks. And now it's just so expensive. Once you do find a good quarterback, you have to keep them. You don't have a choice. So I think a bubble is being created where over the next few years, you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks that maybe don't deserve to be paid like top 10 quarterbacks. They're going to anyway because that's just the way that the contracts are inflating right now at that position. Everybody on average is probably going to be paid around $40 million to play quarterback in the NFL soon. That is realistic. That's probably what's going to happen. Now, eventually, what's going to happen, that bubble that I'm talking about is going to explode because a lot of those contracts are going to be given out. There's going to be like 10 to 12 quarterbacks getting paid $40 million a year on average. None of them are going to live up to the expectations of that contract, or at least half of them won't, right? And then what's going to happen, teams are going to shy away from paying quarterbacks. They're going to get really afraid, and they're going to really harp on winning in that rookie window, and then quarterbacks are going to get cheaper. But that's not going to happen for at least another 5 to 6 years. So this is a time right now that the Giants are in. This is right before the salaries for quarterbacks really start booming. Before it's $40 million per year for every single quarterback in the league, right? That's about to happen. We're about 2 years away from that happening. So the Giants really need to try and win in this rookie window. And if they do not, it's going to get really difficult because Daniel Jones might get overpaid. To me, do you think personally Daniel Jones is worth $25 million a year? No, probably no one really thinks that at this point in his career. He really hasn't proven enough to get paid $25 million a year, but realistically, he could get a contract like that just based on the fact that he is a stable quarterback that we know what we're getting from, and he plays at a somewhat above average level. So he can get that kind of money now because that's the way that these contracts are inflating for these quarterbacks. So I think it's very scary when you look down the road for any team at the quarterback situation. That's why I really do think it's very important for the Giants to try and win in this rookie contract window. But unfortunately, that window is closing very soon, and so there's a lot of uncertainty about what the Giants can actually pull off in this rookie window at this point. But definitely the Giants should try and get as many playmakers around Daniel Jones as possible. Find out what you have in him in year 3 definitively before you go on and commit one of those large contracts or decide to move on. We got to figure it out this year.
Agreed. Dave Gettleman did say this verbatim: we really believe he's the guy. No reason to go look. What we're doing isn't fantasy football. He's everything we want. I don't even know where to start with that. I guess I like Daniel Jones.
I do too.
I like him.
Everything we want though is like,
it's a little.
But you know what? What's he gonna say? He's got to back his quarterback up. So it's like,
of course.
Got to give him his confidence.
If you're gonna back your quarterback, stop talking and start giving him pieces to work with. Okay, stop talking.
Damn, Alex.
Pieces to work with. I don't want to hear the talk anymore.
That was a really good line.
Thank you, but I don't want to hear the talk anymore. I don't want to hear we're so close. We're one step away. We're almost there. I want to see it on the field, man. I'm tired of talking. It's been 3 years of talking. Every single year we hear the same thing from Dave Gettleman. We're one step away. We're finally solving the offensive line. We have our quarterback. We have a star running back. We have 15 wins to show for it in 3 years. What more do we need to see? I want to see wins. I want to see progress. And we saw it on defense. We freaking saw it on defense last year. We saw James Bradbury have a hell of a year. Blake Martinez have his best season. Jabril Peppers have his best season. Leonard Williams have his best season. Thanks to Joe Judge. Thanks to Patrick Graham. Thanks to Gettleman for some good free agent signings and hiring Joe Judge to begin with. Not going to leave him out of that because he played a part in it. But it's time for the offense to make the jump. It's time for them to replicate what the defense did this year. I don't want to hear any more about Daniel Jones being all that we want if he doesn't have anybody to throw to, if he doesn't have an offensive line to stand behind. It's time for him to realize his potential in year 3 like Josh Allen did with the Buffalo Bills last year because they had Stephon Diggs. They had a bunch of really good players, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, a bunch of really good guys. It's time for Daniel Jones to take the step forward and Dave Gettleman to start making the moves to help him get there. And I think he's going to. I think this is the offseason that they're really going to try and do it. And next offseason, they're going to do it too, when they have a little bit more money to spend. So that's all I have to say. I don't want to hear the talk anymore. I want to see it. I want to see action. No more talking. I want to see action. And with that being said, I do think Daniel Jones can be our guy. He has incredible speed for a quarterback. Vanilla Vic, man. The guy can run. He can freaking run. He has a very good deep ball accuracy. Very good deep ball accuracy. Very good intermediate to short range accuracy towards the middle of the field. He's very accurate when towards the middle of the field. And the right side's also pretty strong. Left side is his only kind of kryptonite, but I think he can improve. He has better arm strength than people give him credit for. He can reach the boundaries. We saw it last year. He threw a ball 60 yards downfield to Darius Slayton. He has the arm strength to bomb it downfield if you need him to. This is a quarterback who has all the tangible traits. He just has nothing around him that works. He has backup running backs, reserve rookie offensive linemen, no wide receiver ones, Evan Engram dropping every other pass, a play caller who can't develop route concepts correctly. And Jason Garrett, I think will do better this year. I think he will take a step forward. The guys know the terminology. They understand the system and scheme a little bit more efficiently. I think we will see a better unit. I just think Jason Garrett was trying to build around Saquon Barkley and he just didn't have him. It really, really disrupted his plan. So I'll give him some slack on that perspective. And also, he's used to having different receivers. He's used to having Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. He's used to having Des Bryant. We had Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, guys. We didn't have anyone to compare. No one even close. Sterling Shepard's our closest guy, and he doesn't even slightly compare to Amari Cooper or Des Bryant. They're totally different receivers. So I want to see them go get a good receiver. Even if it's Kenny Golladay, if it's Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel, any of those three will do for me. We just need someone in free agency. Of course, I want to get the best one available. I want to get Kenny Golladay. I think he's a perfect scheme fit for Jason Garrett. And I called this a while ago. I said I don't think he's going to be tagged. I said I did not think he was going to be tagged. I think he'd hit free agency. I think the Giants would have a shot. Problem is, Allen Robinson got tagged, and now Kenny Golladay is the most hot commodity on the market in the wide receiver category, and they're going to have a really hard time signing him. So, Anthony, what do you have to say off of everything I just said? Because I just kind of went on a rant and kind of went blank there for a minute.
Well, I'll discuss Kenny Golladay briefly. Kenny Golladay is now, according to Pro Football Focus and many other opinions of, anybody, right? Kenny Galladay is the number one free agent on the market right now. Now, of course, us Giants fans really want to see the Giants sign Kenny Galladay. Do you think the Dolphins fans don't want to see the same thing? You think Jets fans don't want to see the same thing? You think Eagles, Cowboys, Washington, every single team's fan base doesn't want to see their team sign Kenny Galladay? Pretty much 20 other teams are probably going to call Kenny Galladay and try and sign him. So, I would love him to be on the Giants. Do I think realistically we will get him? You can't say that we will get him. You could say we hope that they do, and hopefully they'll make a run. I think that they'll make a run for sure. They had the interest enough to call and try and trade for him back in October, so I definitely think the Giants are going to call Kenny Galladay and try and sign him, but I can't say with certainty that we're going to make that happen. So you need a backup plan, right? You have to look into that second tier of wide receivers that Giants fans are so afraid of for some reason. You have to look at the guys like Corey Davis, Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel, even Will Fuller. You have to look at those guys and say maybe we can go after one of them if we can't get Kenny Galladay. Because odds are we might not be able to get Kenny Galladay. A lot of teams are going to want him. And a lot of teams have a lot more salary cap space in year one, 2021, than we do, right? We're very tight on cap space this year, so that could be very enticing for Kenny Galladay. Maybe he wants to get a front-loaded contract, and the Giants just can't afford to do that. We can only backload contracts, right? So you got to keep that in mind. And in terms of, those other wide receivers, Corey Davis, Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, personally, yeah, I agree the Giants have to try and get someone. But, if you're only able to get someone from that second tier, you're probably going to want to double dip at the position and go ahead and get another receiver in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. I don't know. It remains to be seen. Like I've said at the start of this episode, this is going to be a really exciting free agency period. We're about a week away. I can't wait to see what happens. Man, I really hope the Giants get Kenny Galladay, but I'm not going to make any promises to fans and say that's going to happen, Giants fans, because, man, who really knows? We go every year and we want them to sign a certain player, and typically they don't sign the players that we want, but sometimes it pans out anyway, right? A lot of fans wanted Byron Jones. We got James Bradbury. James Bradbury is definitely the better signing of the two, so we can all be happy about that, right? So sometimes, Giants fans, we might all really want Kenny Galladay. It's possible that we end up with a Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel ends up being this year's James Bradbury, guy that we didn't necessarily want, but now we all love. It's possible. So keep that in mind. Could happen. Don't be too afraid of these second-tier wide receivers because they can be huge impact players for us. Maybe they fit our scheme perfectly, and the Giants are able to take their offense to another level because of these sign-ins.
Yep, that's pretty much the gist of it, guys. The major takeaways was Evan Engram, the offensive tackles, the inability, the desire not to restructure contracts. But they also did admit that they need to allocate resources toward the offense if the situation presents itself. They made it very clear that if a situation presents itself that's positive, they will entertain it.
I have another takeaway to throw out there because we forgot to mention it. They did briefly discuss Dalvin Tomlinson. They did not say a whole lot, but they said they really want to bring him back. They just don't, they're not going to talk about contracts right now. But they love Dalvin Tomlinson. They want him to be on the roster. That's what Joe Judge said, at least. So hopefully they can get that done. I love Dalvin Tomlinson as well. But, like I said, with the salary cap situation that we're in, plus the fact that we want to try and sign some offensive pieces, might be really tough to get Dalvin under the cap space, especially if they can't get Leonard Williams on a long-term extension by next week. That's going to make it really difficult. But should be interesting. Just wanted to throw that out there. It's another takeaway. Joe Judge does love Dalvin Tomlinson and wants to see him back in blue, as many of us do too.
Exactly right, Anthony. Exactly right. But as always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Fireside Giants, a little breakdown of the takeaways from this press conference. We did get a little bit of information, not too much. They're not going to give away stuff right now as free agency really approaches in a couple days. So really exciting, tons of action. We're produced ridiculous amount of content today for you guys. Working really hard to get you guys informed and the content you guys need to stay in touch with the team, of course. But as always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, hit the notification button on Spotify and Apple. We will catch you guys on the next video.